Sometimes, the most powerful people walk among us unnoticed, and those who, judged by appearances, often live to regret it. This is the story of the day of flight. Attendant disrespected, a man she thought was ordinary. But he was none other than Ibrahim Traoré, the powerful president of Burkina Faso. The story begins on a quiet morning in West Africa. Ibrahim Traoré, the young and decisive leader of Burkina Faso, had boarded a flight for an international trip. Unlike many heads of state who travel with large entourages, Traoré preferred to move simply. He wore plain clothes, carried himself with humility, and did not flaunt his title. To the average person, he might have looked like any ordinary passenger, just another traveler on a routine flight. But on this journey, his quiet humility would lead to an unforgettable confrontation. As passengers settled into their seats, the flight attendants began their rounds. One particular attendant, new to her role and eager to assert authority, noticed Traoré seated calmly in the economy section. She found his simple attire unimpressive and assumed he was just another passenger who didn't matter. In her mind, those who didn't dress expensively or project wealth were not deserving of special respect. Little did she know that her snap judgment would soon place her at the center of a story that would echo far beyond the cabin walls. Traoré, polite as always, asked for a small favor, a glass of water, before the service officially began. The attendant frowned. "Sir, you'll have to wait like everyone else," she snapped, her tone dripping with disdain. Her voice was loud enough for nearby passengers to glance over in curiosity. Traoré, however, did not respond with anger. Instead, he smiled gently, nodded, and sat back. To him, respect was not demanded, it was earned. But for the flight attendant, her dismissive behavior was just the beginning. Moments later, another passenger seated nearby recognized Traoré. Shock flickered across the man's face as he realized who was sitting only a few rows away. Whispering to his companion, he leaned closer. "That's Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso." His companion widened his eyes in disbelief. Yet the flight attendant, overhearing the exchange, scoffed. She assumed it was just a rumor. How could a president possibly be sitting quietly in economy class, without a parade of security guards? To her, the idea was laughable. As the flight continued, the tension grew. The attendant became increasingly curt with Traoré, rolling her eyes when he politely asked another question, and even speaking over him when he tried to clarify a meal preference. Each time, Traoré remained composed, his calmness in stark contrast to her impatience. Other passengers began to notice. Whispers spread across the cabin. Some knew exactly who he was, while others were intrigued by the growing sense that this ordinary passenger was far from ordinary. Finally, one elderly passenger could no longer contain himself. Rising slightly from his seat, he addressed the flight attendant directly. "Young lady," he said firmly, "do you realize who you are speaking to? That man is not just any traveler. He is President Ibrahim Traoré, the leader of Burkina Faso. You should show him the respect he deserves." The cabin fell into a stunned silence. All eyes turned to the flight attendant, whose expression shifted from annoyance to disbelief. The attendant laughed nervously, brushing off the claim, "A president sitting here. Impossible." She glanced at Traoré as if expecting him to deny it. But Traoré only gave a quiet smile, his silence speaking louder than any declaration. At that moment, one of his aides, seated a few rows back, finally stood and produced official identification. The attendant's face drained of color as the realization struck she had been disrespectful to one of Africa's most powerful and respected leaders. An uncomfortable hush blanketed the cabin. Passengers who had doubted now looked at Traoré with newfound awe. Some nodded respectfully, others whispered praises about his humility. Here was a man with the power of a nation at his fingertips, yet he chose simplicity over grandeur. The contrast between his dignity and the attendant's arrogance was painfully clear. Even those who knew little about Burkina Faso could sense that they were in the presence of a leader unlike most. The flight, Attendant, now trembling, approached Traoré. Her earlier confidence had vanished, replaced by nervous stammers. "Mr. President, I'm so sorry. I didn't know," she muttered. Her hands shook as she tried to compose herself. But Traoré, instead of seizing the moment to humiliate her, simply looked her in the eyes and said softly, "Respect should not depend on who someone is, but on how you choose to treat others." His words, calm yet piercing, left the entire cabin reflecting in silence. From that moment onward, the atmosphere on the plane shifted. The flight attendant became unusually attentive, rushing to fulfill Traoré's requests and showing exaggerated politeness. But for many passengers, the lesson had already been learned. They realized that leadership is not about flaunting power or demanding recognition. It is about humility, character, and the ability to command respect through actions rather than titles. And in that cabin high above the clouds, Ibrahim Traoré had once again shown why so many admired him. The story did not end when the plane landed. Word of the incident spread quickly, whispered among passengers, shared on social media, and eventually making headlines. The tale of a young African president who was disrespected yet responded with grace captured hearts around the world. Some praised his humility, others criticized the flight attendant's arrogance. But what stood out most was the reminder that true power does not need to be announced. It reveals itself naturally through how one carries themselves. In Burkina Faso, news of the incident became a point of pride. Many citizens celebrated their president's composure, saying, "This is why we follow him. He is one of us. He does not need to hide behind bodyguards or golden chairs. He walks among his people as an equal." To them, the incident was proof that their leader embodied the values he preached: simplicity, humility, and integrity. In contrast, the flight attendant's behavior became a cautionary tale about the dangers of judging others by appearances. Meanwhile, the flight attendant herself reportedly took the experience to heart. She later confided to colleagues that it had been the most humbling moment of her career. Never again, she vowed, would she treat a passenger based on how they looked or dressed. For her, the encounter had been a painful but powerful lesson in respect. And though her actions had embarrassed her, they had also given her and everyone watching a chance to grow. For Traoré, it was just another journey, another moment to demonstrate who he was at his core. He did not hold grudges, did not demand apologies, and did not use his position to belittle anyone. Instead, he let his example speak louder than words. In a world where many leaders cloak themselves in luxury and demand obedience, his quiet dignity set him apart. He reminded everyone that respect, when genuine, is far more powerful than authority enforced by fear. And so, the story of the flight attendant and president, Ibrahim Traoré, lives on as a reminder. Greatness is often disguised in humility, and true leaders do not need crowns to shine. Next time you meet someone who seems ordinary, remember you may not know the weight they carry or the role they play. Respect costs nothing but means everything. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more powerful lessons from real-life encounters, don't forget to subscribe to our channel because the next story might just change the way you see the world.